The Ascension by Sufjan Stevens has been a very highly anticipated album for quite a good few months now. Sufjan Stevens obviously being such a popular artist at this point, for good reason. He's put out many good albums, many fantastic albums over the years, so anytime he drops anything, his core fan base, including myself, is always looking out for what he's going to put out next. There was the collaboration album earlier this year, which I thought was pretty bad, to be honest. Aporia, I think it was called. Kind of just slipped my memory and completely forgot about it up until this album came out, and I was like, shit, he dropped an album earlier this year. But even with the odd dud in his catalogue, it doesn't really take away from how fantastic his repertoire is, because he has so many great albums. Age of Ads, which has only gotten better over time. You've got Carrie & Lowell, probably the fan favourite at this point. I think that actually might be many people's favourite album overall in his discography. Illinois, of course, what a great album that is. Illinois, man, I love that shit. I could do a full video on Illinois, to be honest, maybe a classic review one day, because it just deserves a full video, because it is just such a phenomenal piece of music. But we're here to talk about The Ascension, and The Ascension kind of follows on a little bit more from the Age of Ads than any other album. You could even look back at Enjoy Your Rabbit, because that was quite electronic leaning as well. It's got that kind of like art pop, sophisticated feel to it with the IDM touches, which I think is cool to see an artist who isn't really known for this sound do this sound. I think most people would think of Sufjan Stevens being the kind of like soft, delicate acoustic boy who makes quite sad songs, but completely transforming your sound on the Age of Ads for very good results kind of shows that you're an incredibly versatile artist and you can do more than just one thing. If I'm being totally honest though, it didn't quite work as well this time around here for The Ascension, as it just isn't really sticking with me. I keep listening to this album. I wanted to review this album earlier in the week, but I couldn't quite find the words to say to explain my thoughts, and even recording this video now, I'm sort of struggling a little bit. The main concern raised with this album for me is the length, which shouldn't be a problem because length of music isn't an inherent issue, but for this album it feels so long. Like, it feels longer than it actually is. I think the main problem with that being is just how each track seems to overstay its welcome. So many of these songs on this album stay beyond 5 minutes. And I just kind of struggle to see why Sufjan chose these lengths, because some of these tracks could be 3 minutes and yet they just drag on and it becomes very stale. Not all the time though, there are some tracks where you can tell there's being ideas stretched and there's a bit of a change of pace throughout the midsection or something like that that kind of carries a song forward. But then you just have some songs like Die Happy just didn't really need this constant repetitious refrain being said over and over and over and over and over and over. And to say the album starts off as adventurous and as intriguing as it does with Make Me an Offer I Cannot Refuse, which I have done a track reaction to that, by the way, which you should go check out, because my raw thoughts on that song are probably the better way to look into how I feel. I feel exactly the same now. Even with repeat listens, I was still kind of wondering where the song was taking me. There's that point where it's about the 4-minute mark, where it just starts teasing you and you're just so unsure of where it's going. The instrumental throughout is quite trippy, almost psychedelic even. You could even compare this to something like Vespertine by Björk. The instrumental is just so of that world, and the vocals from Sufjan are fantastic on this one. It just kind of brings everything together in a way that I think just makes for a very unique listen. And it just explodes into this strange weirdness that much of the album doesn't really grab my attention in the same way. I just don't really get all that enamored with tracks like Video Game, particularly with the vocal performance. It just feels a bit tame. Quite a lot of these vocal performances do feel fairly tame as well, and the percussion on this one is just so repetitive. The synths don't sound all that great. I don't know, man, maybe it's just me, but I just feel like Sufjan could have nailed this a little bit better. Tell Me You Love Me is another example where the vocals just do feel quite tame, especially in the first half, because when you get to that midsection where it kind of like breaks free, it's a pretty fantastic moment. It just builds into this wonderful crescendo that I feel like needed to come a little bit earlier in the song. And then when he's like, I'm gonna love you, with that huge amount of passion, when he screams that line, it's so bloody good. Like, I just feel like there are so many moments on this album that could do with more parts like this, or more build-ups to something that just makes you feel incredibly euphoric. Fan side for me, another example where I just feel like, again, the run time needs to be tighter. The song itself isn't particularly all that interesting, so for it to go on as long as it does just feels like a big bummer. The tunes on some of these tracks just aren't really there, so when they go on for as long as they do, it just feels like you're being dragged on this pointless escapade that you just don't really know where it's going. Gilgamesh, kind of like that, except the instrumental is just so dizzying, it's so cluttered, that I just can't make heads or tails of what I'm listening to. Sure, it's experimental, I guess you could say, but it just really feels like a confusing mess. Just everything is going on in this track, and it just feels like nothing is complementing each other. Sufjan's singing in his usual voice, and it just doesn't really fit. I'm just kind of confused with this. Death Star might actually be even worse for me. Another confusing moment here. The instrumental just sounds really weird and shuffly and awkward. The lyrics, not entirely sure, and the hook is terrible. The hook on this track is horrendous, man. There are moments like this on the album that get repeated where you can kind of see where the vision is for the instrumental. You can see that they're attempting to be a bit strange, a bit esoteric, and not a lot of it really lands. It's a huge shame because there are some great moments, as I've been pointing out, but they just kind of feel pretty scarce in this incredibly long track list. The track Sugar has this very distracting instrumental. Honestly, the production just needs tidying up. This track could be really good in terms of how it sounds, but it just doesn't sound tidy to me. The percussion sounds a bit weird and awkward. It just doesn't sound like something Sufjan would do, because he's usually very meticulous with his work. And a few moments like this just feel very messy to me. The lyrics read a bit corny to me, honestly, but when the instrumental is as bad as it is, the lyrics kind of take a backseat, and I end up focusing on what sounds quite bad about the track. Lamentations is a track that's also a bit odd, as it reminds me of Mad World. The vocal refrains on the verses really sound like Mad World, which is a song I never really liked anyway. So to hear it on this track, not exactly uplifting my spirits, I must say. And the big closer, America, which is quite emotionally potent, as he's comparing himself to America, saying, don't do me like what they did to America. I don't want to be treated in that way. Clearly a political focus on this track, definitely taking a look at the state of America, perhaps. Depending on from your perspective, you could view America as bad, or you could view it as the best country in the world, as many people do. But regardless of that perspective, I feel like there isn't a huge amount of weight behind what Sufjan is saying here. I think the better aspect of the track is the way he's selling the lyrics with his emotional delivery, because he's always very good at that, but I just don't really find that much deep into what he's singing, really. I do like how it is larger than life, though. It definitely tries to take on this adventurous instrumental in a way that reminds me of the opening track too. They don't sound the same, but the idea of what Sufjan is attempting to do reminds me of it. So I at least appreciate this one, but again, with the length, I don't really know if it really carries my attention from start to finish, especially as the last few minutes don't really interest me. And the thing is that we've heard Sufjan do long tracks before, so it's not that he can't do them, it's just that I don't think he's doing them that well here. I mean, this really has nothing on Impossible Soul, which is probably one of his biggest statements in his entire career, and it shows that he can take on these, lengthy, massive massive, gigantic, ginormous instrumentals and make something out of them, because he bloody did it on that song. And this final track here just kind of pales in comparison to some of the other moments that we've seen him do in his career to me. I guess to kind of sum it all up, I'm just not overly impressed with this. I feel kind of let down, was hoping for more, just didn't really tickle my fancy. I don't know why I just said that, but I guess I'm disappointed and I don't really know what else to say. I'm going to go 5.5 out of 10. Hopefully you enjoyed this album a lot more than I did though, and let me know your thoughts in the comments where it ranks for you in his discography. Do you think it's one of his best? Do you think it's one of his worst? Or do you actually think it's somewhere in the middle? Because you might do, and you might think it's pretty good, but you're not totally blown away by it. But for me, it just doesn't really impress me that much from start to finish. Hopefully I've explained myself and hopefully you can see where I'm coming from. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. Do have a good day and goodbye.